Finally, lockdown has eased again, so our EQ has had a proper chance to stretch its legs on the motorway network. It's largely as you would expect of an electric luxury car, cosseting, quiet and hugely capable. Occasionally its weight causes the ride to crash on ruts or ripples, and some wind noise comes off the door mirrors. But overall, it's among the most relaxing cruisers on sale. The electric EQ is based heavily on the conventionally powered GLC, but, due to its slightly more sloping roofline, is in theory slightly less practical. However, 6 months in, and with 2 tall teenaged kids, I've yet to encounter a journey on which it can carry us and all we have in total comfort. Frankly, it makes me wonder why anyone needs anything bigger. The Mercedes EQ has had a pretty good time of it at the hands of Autocar's expert testers, from winning a group test against the Audi e-tron, Jaguar I-Pace and Tesla Model X when they first got their hands on it in 2019, through to more recently being crowned the best luxury EV when it was put through its paces in a video special that pitted this very car against the latest iterations of the e-tron and I-Pace just a few weeks ago. What stands out is that the Mercedes keeps scooping these accolades as much for its all-round ability as any exceptional features. In so many ways, it is a conservative take on what a cutting-edge electric car could be, yet the end result is so rounded and so well resolved that, if you can forgive the strictly come dancing analogy, the judges end up scoring it accomplished 8s across the board, whereas other rivals pick up 9s in some areas, the I-Pace for handling, for instance, but slip back with 6s and 7s elsewhere. But what really struck me in James Disdale's video was his summary that the EQ is the closest thing to an electric S-Class there is, at least for now, with the actual X having now been revealed but not yet on sale. It's high praise indeed, the S-Class having sat at the top of luxury car estimations for as long as my memory can extend, and it's an entirely apt description in my view, after thousands of miles in the EQ, because the biggest impression this car makes is not how striking it looks or how well it handles, but rather the overwhelming sense of calm that it bestows upon occupants. It achieves that almost subliminally, and if you were to judge it in isolation, I fear there would be a risk that you might even miss it, so conventional is the shape, layout and other tech, and so unassuming is it to drive, the electric motor coupling with suspension settings that seem determined to prioritize wafting along and achieving it overall but the sharpest of ruts or potholes. It is, after all, based heavily on the entirely conventional GLC, modifications such as the lit-up grille and sweeping dash screen nodding towards its electric powertrain, but struggling to ape the wow factor of the bespoke e-tron, I-Pace and Model X. But it also highlights that the development of EVs has some way to go. Perhaps we've been spoiled, but, controversy alert, I'd argue there are more combustion engine cars out there that are exceptional than battery-powered ones. Given fuel-burning cars have had 130 or so years of development, that shouldn't be a shock, and there's a neat debate to be had over when the peak was for them. However, much though I love the EQ, and especially love driving it, I believe its string of 8 out of 10s highlights how far EVs must travel before they peak desirability as universally as the very finest cars in history have achieved. Today, what's important is that the journey has begun, and that the EQ is very much the best of this breed. I would recommend its qualities in a heartbeat. But over a very short period of time, I also think we'll come to expect even more. A lot is written on the inconvenience of public charging, but not enough on the ease of driving home, plugging in, going to bed and waking up with a full tank. It's 6 months since I've visited a fuel station, and I haven't missed the time loss or mucky hands one bit. There are pros and cons to EVs, but if you're lucky enough to have a drive, this is a definite plus. Yes, it has been cold lately, with frost a regular fixture and the occasional flurry of snow paralyzing the roads even in these lockdown times. No big deal, you might think. It happens every year. But for an EV driver, the cold really is the enemy. This latest scenario has been fascinating for noting the impact that it has had on the X range. In the simplest terms, the answer appears to be the immediate loss of 25 miles of predicted range, or around 15% of the battery's charge, when it's above about 10 degrees C. In my experience, that's actually an impressive result for the EQ in comparison to other EVs, with the average loss I've noted across a variety of cars being 15 to 25%. It has been significant enough in all cases for us to highlight this potential scenario to would-be buyers. But perhaps more notable was the ongoing impact of the cold on range from there on. Neat and nice to do are very different, of course, and it's true that I could have used my hands and worn more clothes, but in this £70,000 premium car it seemed foolish not to use the electric systems to defrost the screens, warm the cabin and waft heat at my backside. The smart idea, which almost all EVs are capable of, is to do all this before you even get to the car, while it is still plugged in and can sup on the mains to top itself up. I've done this many times with the EQ, and it works well. It can even be done via an app on your phone. However, on this occasion, good man that I am, with the slippery ice forming, I had left the driveway to my petrol driving wife and was up on the curb away from home. In a petrol or diesel car, you give almost no thought to the energy you are burning to create the energy to warm you or your car up, but in the EQ, it's quite a stark reminder that your actions have consequences, the depleting range on icy trips equating to around 2 for every mile actually covered. At one point, and I need to research this more, I seriously wondered if I was using more power running the heaters than powering the car. That was a worst-case situation, a short trip with everything on maximum, but it does add another thing to the checklist for any would-be EV buyer. Tesla's Easter eggs or surprises that pop up if you press a certain combination of buttons, perhaps making your car look like a Mario Kart on the sat-nav or producing Monty Python's Foot of Cupid on screen. Well, Mercedes has had a go too, offering a drive to Santa's hometown in the run-up to Christmas. I didn't take it up, but it made me smile. And breathe. Many words have been written about the zen-like state that washes over you when you drive an EV, but I think the Mercedes-Benz EQC experience takes that to a whole other level, so much so that I actually get excited about driving it and can, no word of a lie, feel myself relaxing as I put hand to door handle and prepare to slide in. How so? I have to acknowledge that 2020 must be playing a part, my commute having become the 6 steps from the side of my house where I sleep to the side of my house where I work. No question, leaving the front door has become significantly more novel and exciting than it once was or should be, but that's not all. While the interior of the EQ draws heavily on architecture found in other Mercedes models, it feels perfectly resolved, from the swathes of uniformly high-quality leather to the gloss finishes and the eye-catching touchscreen across the dashboard that takes in everything from the performance dials to the infotainment system. It also helps that the seats are comfortable, there are all manner of adjustments for getting cozy, and you sit high, magnifying the feeling of well-being as you imperiously glide along. That instant torque you get in an EV, so often referenced for its savage performance, is more noteworthy in my book for giving you total control of the accelerator. There's no estimation required as to how much pedal travel is needed, as progress is deliberate and linear. Design flourishes, such as the copper color air vents that mimic the look of an electric circuit, add a bespoke touch too. Drive for an hour, and it will even suggest a change in the color of the mood lighting, plus play 10 minutes of uplifting music to keep you alert. I know how crass that sounds, and it's easy to be cynical, but I find this actually works too, even if only by shaking my conscience. This is no Bentley or Rolls-Royce, but the EQC interior is so special that those earned ridiculous brands to draw a parallel with. Certainly all that I've described elevates it above and beyond a mainstream Mercedes experience and puts it, in some ways, into a realm I previously associated with only very top-end cars, as it eases 10% of life's strains away and makes you feel special. With the EQ reckoning it had 225 miles worth of charge, the Holder family set off on an 85-mile each-way trip to Seaford, near Brighton, for a last pre-lockdown walk on the beach on the windiest, wettest of days. Alarmingly, we arrived with 111 miles of predicted range remaining, but disarmingly got home with 30 left. How so? Incredibly, I can only put it down to the wind direction. Stomp. Honk. Thump. In less than 10 meters, my early morning drive had escalated from mundane school run to full-blown disaster. The young lad, who moments earlier had emerged from a driveway at pace on his bike, popping out onto the road from behind a parked car, was now flat out, just ahead of the EQC's front right wheel. It had been quite an impact, him having turned out looking only for traffic behind him, me filling all the road space as I negotiated my way down a residential street with parked cars on either side. Thankfully, I just passed a refuse truck so had slowed as workers wandered to and fro, not necessarily tuned in to listen for an electric car, and therefore had enough time to both stop before the boy hit me and sound the horn so that he could both brake and pull the sort of face that you think is the sole preserve of hammy actors. As I jumped out of the car, leaving a one-time critic of what I'd hitherto thought were absurdly slow 20 miles per hour zones behind forevermore, the boy leapt up, insisting he was fine. His slow walk to the pavement, where he took a seat, suggested otherwise. The binman and I dusted him down, checked him over, suggested the helmet attached to his handlebars might be better affixed to his head and he got back on the bike and cycled off as fast as he could, I suspect fearing a telling off. In truth, I've never been so glad for a scratch on my car. Even so, although I was able, just, to stop before impact, there's no escaping the harsh truth that everything I was doing or did might not have been enough to save him from injury a few seconds later. That, in turn, got me thinking about the EQC safety systems. Just 2 weeks earlier, they had instigated an emergency stop as a mother and 3 young children walked on the pavement near the car. Yes, the kids were weaving about, but at no point had I thought they would spill onto the road. It was an experience that had left me shaken and grateful that there was nobody behind me. Now after the boy on bike incident, I was wondering why those same systems had this time done nothing to try to help me. I know the driver must always take responsibility, but this mishmash of intervention and non-intervention, each perfectly at the wrong time, has left a deep impression. While I know there's more time and effort to be expended, it certainly raises further questions about the capabilities of self-driving tech and the risk of it causing incidents by overreacting or not reacting at all, as the various radar systems evidently don't have a good enough line of sight or make the right decisions. I was lucky enough to get the best case outcomes from the worst case failures. No rear end shunt from that emergency stop, no motoring into and over the boy and his bike. If, conversely, it ever steps in at the right time, I'll forever be grateful. But I have never relied on safety tech, and nor can I imagine doing so in my lifetime. Proof, to my mind at least, that the step from laboratory to real life is fraught with more complications than many imagine. The EQC is far from the only culprit, but the scourge of the offset pedal needs highlighting. In this 2-pedal setup, my right foot is forced too far to the side to line up with the accelerator, prompting a knee-grinding pivot to come across to the brake. It doesn't slow the movement down, so is perfectly safe, but it does grind on my middle-aged joints. I had high hopes for Mercedes' voice recognition. But it's proving a bit hit and miss so far. Sometimes it picks up my commands, even complex postcodes, but at other times it gets confused. It's early days, and I'm finding a more relaxed chatting voice is more effective than a carefully enunciated one. Let's hope we learn to get along better in time. Sometimes it takes a little jeopardy to push boundaries. Just a night before, I'd done a radio phone in about electric cars, suggesting that they're generally hugely capable and that for many more people than are buying them, they could be the perfect means of transport. And then I went to bed without checking my schedule for the next day. So it was with no little amount of horror that I then awoke to discover that after 6 months of commuting 12 paces from my bed to my chair, I was due in Northampton, 89 miles away, and that I hadn't charged the rather lovely Mercedes-Benz EQC overnight. Did I grab the keys to my wife's trusty 10-year-old Honda Civic, or did I live the change I wanted to see? I'll admit that my hand flicked from one set of keys to the other more than once, but after a calming few minutes online researching charger locations, I knew I had to live by my own words. My almost calamitous organization meant I had to leave 30 minutes earlier than otherwise, but if all went well, I'd be on time and have enough electrons whizzing around beneath my feet to get home again. And surprise, I drove, I stopped, and a 35-minute stop at an Ionity Polar charging station just off the M1 delivered around 70 miles of charge. Naysayers take note. There were 11 fairly high-speed chargers at this well-known location, and I was the only one using them. Come a short distance off the motorway these days, and it feels like you're never far from a chance for a rapid top-up. And while I waited, I was able to go online and clear my emails, so even having to leave early had upsides, too. So now experience means my personal comfort zone on how far I'm prepared to go when I'm out and about is greatly expanded, and I can look forward to really enjoying the merits of the EQC, Mercedes' first effort at an all-in electric vehicle and a pioneer of the firm's EQC sub-brand. Sure, it might look familiar to anyone who has ever clapped their eyes on a GLC, bar the coupe-like rear end and some nifty design flourishes, from the XL-sized badge, wheels and light arrangements, through to the copper-colored finishes on the air vents, to look like the internals of circuit boards, naturally. But Mercedes is far from the only one to have gone for a relatively conservative start to this journey. The EQC is a car that has been eagerly anticipated on our fleet for some time, not just because it carries a large price tag and the promise of premium refinements and some cutting-edge tech, but also because it was declared the winner of an all-electric showdown with the Audi e-tron, Jaguar I-Pace and Tesla Model X by our road test team last year. It edged the verdict on account of being much the easiest of the cars to live with, as well as delivering decent, if not class-leading quantities of those sometimes most diverse of characteristics. driver involvement and comfort and practicality. No question, this is a car that makes you go wow. Since it arrived 10 days ago, there has been a line of passing kids peering through the windows. One of the more enjoyable distractions of working from home is earwigging on what future generations think about the cars on my driveway, and that in itself is clear proof of the journey that Mercedes, not so long ago the favored choice for anyone who considered string gloves the height of fashion, has undergone in recent years. It's also a trajectory that cars like the EQC must accelerate if this so-called legacy car maker is to remain relevant into the future. First impressions? To drive, it's a cut above the average electric car, which means relaxing or fast on demand, with a frisson of dynamic excitement on offer, albeit one that can never hide its 2,495 kilograms curb weight and sits short of what the I-Pace achieves. It's a joy to be in, from its comfortable, beautifully upholstered seats to its abundance of practical cubbies. The massive, dashboard-length infotainment and instruments screen and the head-up display give a futuristic air, although I suspect it's going to take time for the array of screen, dash and steering wheel buttons to all fall to hand intuitively. The voice-controlled Hey Mercedes system helps with that, but isn't infallible as far as my southern English mumbling is concerned. Range will be interesting too. As it dials into my driving style, an indicated 210 miles is being shown, rather than the official 232. Consider also that it seems to be rating its capabilities around 5% too highly, and you end up with a car that records a sub-200-mile figure. That's potentially 25% short of what I'd consider ideal and less than the Kia e-Niro offers for half the price. It will be interesting to find out if I can learn to use the various driving modes more efficiently and dial my driving style into the car better too. Most exciting of all is the fact that the EQC is already pushing the boundaries of what I thought I knew about EVs or was willing to do. Question is it going to lead me down a path of fulfillment or trouble? I'm most interested to find out how Jim gets on with the EQC's various driving modes and semi-autonomous driving aids. It's a complicated thing to get on terms with, as I discovered on the international press launch in Oslo and on a group test. It just shaded its electric rivals in the latter, mostly by being the most multi-talented car on the day. But the way the regenerative braking system manages itself around town, if you leave it in auto mode, certainly raises some drivability quirks.